they're hopeful that March Madness set a really good precedent for their baseball programs. 14 of the 16 teams reached that field. They think that there should be similar results on the baseball side too.
All right, so now we bring in Jacob Rudner, getting ready to talk some college baseball. There is plenty to talk about in that college baseball world. Starting out, we've just talked about the mock draft. There is a number one there that we just discussed. And now let's talk about the new number one in the college top 25. They made their way up all the way from number two. And that's Texas. We haven't seen a jump like that before. Yeah, so Texas taken over the number one spot, a new number one each of the last 3 weeks. This is the fourth number one team of the year. You can put all the SEC teams in a hat and just draw a name out, and that'll give you that week's number one pick. But for Texas, they got the weekend series victory at Kentucky. Also got some help from Arkansas losing to Georgia. So, Jacob, we can look at those series results and understand the reason of the jump, but what in your mind makes Texas deserving of that number one spot?
Yeah, I've been really impressed throughout this entire season with just the roster makeup and what Jim Schlossnagle has been able to do with that team in his first year with the program. It's an incredible blend of high school recruiting, transfer recruiting, and something that's really important in today's day and age of college sports, which is re-recruiting the players that were on the roster already. He had to come in and basically convince guys that we're going to win a lot of games and you're going to want to be a part of this. And they had a lot of success. Jalen Flores, Will Gasparino, Rylan Galvan are all guys who are having fantastic seasons and returned. Luke Harrison, the same on the mound. And then the transferring, like I talked about, has been really impressive too. Jared Spencer, Ruger Riojas are number one and number three in their starting rotation. Spencer came from Indiana State, Riojas from UTSA. Ethan Mendoza, their starting second baseman and leader in batting average, was a transfer from Arizona State. And then you look at the pedigree of a guy like Jim Schlossnagle. He's had one losing season in his last 23 years as a Division I head coach, and the winning has followed. So certainly an impressive roster makeup for that group. Schlossnagle is a very impressive coach, and the record, of course, has propelled them to that number one spot.
So, Jacob, this is the third different number one we've had in the past 3 weeks. What are the chances that Texas kind of holds on to this for a little while, or looking at their schedule kind of ahead? They've got some pretty tough battles coming up as well. Is there a pretty decent chance that we're going to see some further shuffling of this over the next few weeks?
I would say so. And I'm hard pressed to believe that we won't, just given the track record over the last couple of weeks. Kelsey said, we've had 3 new number one teams in 3 weeks. It was Arkansas last week, Tennessee the week before that. And who knows what it's going to be next week. Texas has a real challenge with number 7 Auburn coming to town this week. And like we've talked about, I mean, we could see Auburn make a jump from number 7 all the way up to that number 1 spot. In the SEC, nothing is given. We have learned and probably already knew that conference is a real gauntlet. And guaranteeing wins, there's no such thing. So, I would think that Texas has the chops to be able to stay at the top of our rankings right now, and they've certainly done enough to get to that point. We look at them as one of the top 5 projected seeds for the NCAA tournament in a couple months. But the reality is that it's very unpredictable, especially in that conference. And they have a really tough week ahead and more after that.
Yeah, Auburn coming up next. That's going to be a big test, like you just said. So, talking about Jim Schlossnagle, let's talk about his former team in Texas A&M. Are they back? I mean, we've seen 2 of 3 out of from Tennessee at Tennessee, who was ranked number 1 at the time. They went on and they swept South Carolina. We're going to learn a lot in these next 2 series. But for a team that came into this season ranked number 1 in the preseason polls, have these last 2 series convinced you guys that the talent is there and the success can be there the rest of the season? Or are you depending on these next 2 big tests to really solidify what A&M could be the rest of the year?
I think both things can be true. I think we've said all along that Texas A&M has one of the most talented, if not the most talented roster in all of college baseball. You've got a guy like Jaslav Wallet leading, your lineup. They have a starting rotation of all draft guys. Ryan Prager, Justin Lampkin, Miles Patton have all impressed so far this season. It hasn't necessarily been the easiest go for them in the last couple weeks, but they continue to win games. But I do still think that we need to see more. I mean, they have a series against the former number 1 Arkansas this week, where I think we're going to learn a lot. But the numbers look really good right now. They started out the season 10-9 and fell out of the top 25 after week 5, which was one of the worst starts by a preseason number one, really this century, and dating back to about 1999 when USC had a tough go after opening the season as number one. Since then, things have looked a lot better though. 10-6 over their last 16 games, 7-3 over their last 10. They're very importantly up to number 49 in RPI and 18th in total home runs on the season. They're just outside the top 50 in scoring offense. So I think that we're seeing signs that they could be breaking out of that early season slump. Coaching change and all the movement that they've had around that program could certainly be a factor. And perhaps now they're just shaking the rust off. And I think that we could eventually see Texas A&M reach the postseason. They're 6-9 right now in the SEC. 13 wins is kind of the generally accepted threshold to get into the NCAA tournament. And I do think that Texas A&M has what it takes to get there. It will not be easy. They have a series at Arkansas, like I said, at Texas, home versus LSU, home versus Missouri, and at Georgia. I just named 4 teams that have at some point been ranked inside our top 5. So the test is real, but I think it's a really good team with a lot of talent.
But I do want to also bring up with that you have a story up today at baseballamerica.com that kind of lays out that the SEC is trying to make the case, hey, okay, 13, great. Yeah, if someone gets 13 wins in the SEC, absolutely they should be in. But the SEC is kind of using basketball to kind of make the case that maybe it shouldn't be that, that hard. Like conference losses shouldn't count the same way. Is that kind of the case that's starting to be laid out there?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, I spoke with an SEC official who has conversations regularly with coaches, and he was saying that they're hopeful that March Madness set a really good precedent for their baseball programs. 14 of the 16 teams reached that field. They think that there should be similar results on the baseball side too. They have a lot of really talented teams. And like I was told, there's kind of a cannibalization issue in the SEC where you have good teams beating up on good teams and somebody has to lose the game. So, when you have these top 25 teams constantly facing each other, the results are going to be messy. There will be teams that make the postseason that have under 500 conference records. But we saw just last year that really isn't indicative of where teams stake out in the national scene. Florida made the NCAA tournament at 13-17 overall in conference and just 2 games above 500 overall, which is barely even legally able to get into the tournament. And they went all the way to Omaha. So the SEC harbors a lot of great teams. And I think that certainly, this could be another year where we have some squads that don't have the shiniest overall or conference records, but are talented enough to do a lot of damage in the postseason.